Hey, what's up, people? Piz out here, and I had intended to do a video talking about The Dark Knight Rises, my thoughts on that movie, a review, whatever. But I would feel remiss if I didn't talk about the movie along with the tragedy that is now sort of, the two are sort of linked at this point. The shooting in Colorado is what I'm talking about, of course. Been all over the media. An awful tragedy. We can all agree that it was just a horrible, awful tragedy. What we're not going to agree upon, though, is why it happened, how it happened, or, well, not how it happened, why it happened, what triggered the gunman to want to do that. I mean, that whenever something like this happens, whenever a horrible tragedy like this happens, we immediately jump to find, we want to know why it happened. And of course, already they're talking about, such, well-worn and familiar issues for this territory, like gun control and violence in the media, and what part those two things played in the tragedy. And honestly, I don't think either one played a role in the tragedy. Gun control is always going to be something that's going to be highly debated and fought over and just, pissed about endlessly. We all have a right to bear arms. That's in the Constitution. What kind of arms should we be allowed to bear? I mean, that's something else. I mean, there's a big difference between owning a hunting rifle to go deer hunting and owning an assault rifle for, just because you can own it. I mean, that's a whole other subject. Do we need to own assault rifles and rapidly firing automatic weapons to, quote unquote, protect ourselves and our homes and all that stuff? I don't know. I mean, that's a question for a different day. Violence in media is always something that is the first finger pointed to a cause. For a tragedy like this is always violence in the media. Violence in movies, violence in video games, violent lyrics in music. The point that I want to make is, the gunman in Colorado was clearly a deeply, deeply disturbed person. He was also clearly a very smart, intelligent person as well. And usually those two things go kind of hand in hand. With great intelligence comes some mental disorders. It's commonplace, but whether it had been The Dark Knight Rises, clearly he orchestrated this thing. He thought it out. He booby-trapped his apartment. He rigged it with all sorts of explosives. He went out, in theatric. Well, he didn't go out, but he did this in such a theatrical manner. The midnight screening of the biggest movie of the summer. He's dressed up, armed to the teeth. 20 minutes into the flick, he had allegedly, bought a ticket, went in, rigged the emergency door so that it would open. He went out, changed into his garb, got his weapons, came back in through the emergency door and just opened fire. Clearly, the guy, yes, disturbed. Also, yes, clearly a pretty intelligent guy. Whether or not it was The Dark Knight Rises that he chose to commit this crime act at really is superfluous. Disturbed people don't really need too much of a push to have them do disturbing things, is the point, I think. So whether it be The Dark Knight, doesn't matter if you listen to violent, dark, heavy metal music, or if you liked playing violent shoot-'em-up video games like Call of Duty, or if you like to watch violent, bloody horror movies or action movies. It doesn't matter. He was going to do this sooner or later anyway, is the point. Did the spectacle of The Dark Knight Rises and of it being the biggest movie of the summer and it being the midnight screening, did that play a huge part in it for him? Absolutely. But, it could have been anything, really. my girlfriend and I were talking about this on the ride home from the movie yesterday, because The Dark Knight is The Dark Knight Rises, I'm sorry, it's the darkest of the three. It's the gloomiest. It's the most just brutal. The character of Bane is just, he's brilliant and he's brutal. And, that kind of brutality, that kind of violence, I think for her, in what she kind of thought was going to be, she understood that it was, it's based on comic book material, but that it's based in more of a realistic, or as realistic a, backdrop, and lending as much realism to the material as possible. And I think she thought that those two coming together with the comic booky things, and that kind of blunt, abrupt, viciousness and violence. Because there's a big body count in The Dark Knight Rises, and I think that kind of disturbed her. Of course, also going to the movie, the day after the tragedy, also I think shook her up a little bit. There were armed police officers at the theater. About 20 minutes into the theater, a theater employee walked through, checked the emergency door casually, turned around, casually walked right back out, which I'm sure everybody in the theater was like, wow. I know, my girlfriend and I were like, well, that's nice. But that's the point that I want to make, and I'm sure there's been a ton of these videos out there talking about that and defending, gun control laws, or defending, violence in media, or completely opposing it. For me, I grew up watching 100 times more violent movies than The Dark Knight Rises. I grew up watching all the horror movies you can imagine. I grew up playing all the super violent video games you can imagine. When people still bought CDs, I saw that little label on it, the little parental advisory sticker. I was like, I'm getting that. That must be good. That must be good. That must be good. It must, it's either going to be super dirty or super violent or both. So that's what I want to buy. I've never heard of the artist, but it's got that sticker on it. That's the sticker of approval as far as I was concerned. For every one person that is so disturbed that a violent video game or a violent movie pushes them over the edge, there's tens of millions of people out there who watch the same thing, or listen to the same thing, or play the same thing, and it has absolutely no effect on. Am I desensitized to violence in movies and stuff like that? Pretty much, yeah. But a little desensitization, being a little desensitized really never hurt anybody, because the real world is far scarier than any movie I've ever seen. I've stood in line with people at theaters that were 100 times scarier than Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy, whoever the villain was, and whatever movie I was standing outside to see was. Reality is horrible enough. Movies to most of us are just a simple escape, and that's what they should be. To others, though, unfortunately, it could be that little enough of a push to send them over the edge. But again, whether they got that push from a movie, or whether they got that push from just somebody looking them the wrong way in public, they were going to snap at some point or another. I don't think we can blame television, movies, video games, music, etc. for that violence. So that's kind of what I wanted to get out there. Kind of not really a super focused little diatribe from me, but like I said, I would have felt remiss not talking about the tragedy along with the movie The Dark Knight Rises, because unfortunately at this point the two are really intertwined. You can't really talk about one without talking about the other. It was hard for me not to sit and watch the movie at certain points and kind of think about the tragedy. So unfortunately one will be linked with the other probably forever, unfortunately. But really heart goes out to all the victims and the victims' families, and just like I said, tragic. But again, that's it and that's all. So thanks for watching, and keep your eyes peeled for the Dark Knight Rises review that I will post shortly. So until next time, you guys take it easy. Peace.